Welcome to another weekly maritime video blog. I'm Corey Ransom with International Maritime Security Associates. This week, I am without adult supervision. We're going to discuss law enforcement operations within the exclusive economic zone. On this blog in the past, we've talked about law enforcement operations in international waters when it comes to bilateral agreements and some of the complexities around that. Today, we're going to talk about law enforcement operations in the exclusive economic zone. And the reason that we decided to discuss law enforcement operations in the exclusive economic zone was there was a case that came to fruition a couple of weeks ago. It actually started back in 2013 where Russian agents boarded a Dutch flag Greenpeace vessel to enforce their laws and regulations within the exclusive economic zone. The crew was arrested and the vessel was seized. The Dutch took the Russians to court. Obviously, the Russians didn't show up, and the Permanent Court of Arbitration basically upheld the laws and regulations set forward under the UN's Convention of Law at Sea and said that the Russians in that particular situation did not have the right to board the Dutch vessel within their exclusive economic zone. Now, the Russians were ordered to pay over $6 million in restitution to the Dutch government and also for damage to the vessel, and we know that that obviously will not get paid. But it brings up a really interesting discussion topic on the exclusive economic zone. So we thought we would cover that just a little bit more here on our weekly video blog. The exclusive economic zone extends from the baseline, or basically from the shoreline, out to 200 nautical miles. Now, under the UN's, we've talked about it, under the UN's Convention of Law at Sea, which the United States is not a signatory, however, was one of the framers of the UN's Convention of Law at Sea, and a number of parts within that. The U.S. recognizes many parts of this, but has not signed the actual documents and is one of the remaining countries to actually sign this. However, the UN's Convention of Law at Sea really looks at different operations for countries across maritime borders. So it sets up a territorial sea limit of 12 nautical miles. Within 12 nautical miles, a country can enforce all of their laws and regulations within that zone. It also sets forward an exclusive economic zone where countries can enforce certain laws and regulations within the exclusive economic zone. And they typically get to oil exploration, mining operations, and fishing operations, anything with an economic impact on that particular country. Now, enforcement of exclusive economic zone operations is always very interesting. And again, I'm going to use the United States as an example. The United States is roughly off the Florida Keys, about 90 to 100 miles outside of Cuba. So obviously in that situation, the United States couldn't enforce a 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone. So under the UN's Convention of Law at Sea, it states that two countries who have an overlapping jurisdiction, which means that if their 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone would cross, that those countries would need to work out which portion belongs to what country. And that's always very difficult to do. And within the Straits of Florida, very difficult to do because the Cubans claim one thing and the United States claims another. The reason we thought this would be an interesting topic to bring up is just within the boarding operations. There are a number of bilateral agreements that countries have with different countries that allow their law enforcement personnel to board the flag vessel of the country they have the bilateral agreement with. So here, for example, in the United States government has a number of bilateral agreements with a slew of countries around the world where they're able to board and enforce laws and regulations on that flag state's vessel in international waters. Bilateral agreements are very interesting, and if you haven't seen our other episode, we'll make sure we post a link to it below. Countries have the exclusive right to enforce their economic laws, again, what we discussed just a moment ago within the exclusive economic zone, but they don't have the authority to enforce the sum total of their laws and regulations within that zone. But you have to remember that not all countries play by the rules. So there's a number of countries around the world that will try to enforce their laws and regulations even within the exclusive economic zone. So when you take your vessel to different parts of the world, it's a really good idea to understand how the countries enforce certain laws and regulations within the territorial seas and also within the exclusive economic zone. There's another case that happened a number of years ago where a vessel called the Seaman Guard, which was a maritime security vessel, was forced into Indian territorial seas. Well, they had guns and ammunition on board, and because that was illegal by Indian law, the vessel was seized and the crew was arrested. To this day, I think we're probably 4 years past this now, there are some crew members that are still being held by the Indian government because of that. So there's a number of governments that take the enforcement of their laws and regulations within the territorial seas very seriously. If there's anything we can do to help you with your maritime risk management, your regulatory compliance, whether you're a vessel or a facility, or you have questions about law enforcement operations, bilateral agreements, and the authority and jurisdiction of law enforcement agencies around the world, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We invite you to subscribe to this YouTube channel so you get notified when we post new videos. Also, make sure you hit the like button on all the videos you like. And we would love to have you as subscribers within our social media. Our links are detailed in the banner above and the comment section below. We're happy to steer you in the right direction. Make sure you check out last week's video. We'll have a link for it in the comments section below.